Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Christian Church of Austin, where no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're invited and welcome. This Sunday, January 18th, 2015, we remember the prophetic ministry and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with our special guest preacher and teacher, Mr. Sherwynn Patton, of Life Anew, a nonprofit forging new paths to restorative justice, particularly in Austin schools. Mr. Patton's sermon is a reflection on a reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 4, verses 1 through 14. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry, simply head over to our website, www.uccaustin.org. Thank you. A reading from the New Testament, from the Gospels, from the Gospel according to John, chapter 4, verses 1 through 14. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard, Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John, although it was not Jesus himself but his disciples who baptized, he left Judea and started back to Galilee. But he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water, gushing up to eternal life." Friends, God is still speaking to the world. May our hearts be open to listen and respond. Amen.
All right. So, relationships. I heard it once said that life is about relationships. The rest is just details. Life is about relationships. The rest is just details. And when we look at history, it's always been about whether or not we had a relationship with one another. And any time that you saw any disruption in our society, it started that way because there was a breakdown in the relationships that we have with one another. And so today, all I want to really talk about is our inclusive God. The God that cared so much about our relationship with Him that He knew that we had to have a relationship with one another. And if we want to see change in our society, we're going to have love, compassion. We're going to have a real relationship with one another. Look at your neighbor and tell them, "I have to have a relationship." Look at your neighbor and say, "I have to have a relationship that matters." There we go. So I'm going to help you all out today. Is the mic on? We good? That better? All right. So relationship that matter. All right. That's the reason why y'all didn't respond, because y'all didn't.
We'll see that.
That's a lesson within itself. So speaking about relationships, I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. And I know what you all are thinking. You all are thinking that he's too young to have a granddaughter. You're right. But I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. And my 4-year-old granddaughter is just so beautiful. I learned so much from her. And my granddaughter's name is Ariana. And Ariana calls me Dad. Now, the reason why she calls me Dad is because she doesn't know her biological dad. Her biological dad, unfortunately, is incarcerated, and she probably won't ever see him until she's an adult. So she calls me Dad. So one day I decided that I was going to take my granddaughter on a date. And so in my selfishness, I said, I'm going to take her to a place called Gus's Fried Chicken downtown. So when I took her to Gus's, immediately we walk in and she says, Dad, we need to sit over there. And when she said that, I listened to her and I was like, okay, we need to sit over there at that table. So we walked together over to the table. And when we get to the table, I immediately sit down. And when I sat down in the chair, she said, no, you're sitting in my chair. You're sitting in my chair. You need to get up, and I'm going to sit there, and you sit right here. So when she told me that, I got up and I said, okay, you're right. I need to sit in that chair. I'm sorry, I didn't listen for your next set of instructions. So when I sat down in the chair, it dawned on me, God began to speak to me. You know, it's not that I needed her to show me where to sit. I didn't need that. She didn't even know where the restaurant was, so she didn't even know where she was. So I definitely didn't need her to tell me where to sit. But she needed to feel as if she could lead me. She needed to feel as if she had value. I needed to affirm her by allowing her to show me where to sit. And so when I look at this text today that's going to teach us a lot about the movement that all of us are involved with right now, when I look at this text, it's the same way with Jesus. Jesus included this woman at the well, and he allowed her to serve him so that he could reach her at the place of common humanity. Because if Jesus is Jesus, the Son of God, which he is, then we know that Jesus was fully God and he was fully human all at the same time. So Jesus had this infinite wisdom. So he knew that if he was going to a place where he was going to need water, he could have carried along some disciples with him with a bucket to draw the water. Or he could have just said, let there be some water, and there would have been some water. But Jesus chose not to do that. He chose to go to this well, be in a place where he was vulnerable, be in a place where this woman could see that he has a need, and he showed his human side. He said, will you give me something to drink? Now, immediately in that moment, he was adding value to this woman's life. He was allowing her to see that I am just like you are. I have needs just like you do. I have things that I struggle with just like you do. Just like you have to come to this well to get water, I have to come to this well to get water too. And a lot of times when we look at where we are in this movement, we don't see that we have to draw water from the same well. I might live in East Austin and you may live in West Austin, but we're still drawing water from the same well. And that well that we draw from is that well called love. And if we're not drawing from that same well, what will happen is we will die together. Because it will leave each one of us thirsty for something that we know that we need. Here they are at this well, and Jesus adds value to her life. And then at that moment, he realizes his own limitations. And when I say that, I see a lot of people look at me kind of funny. I've said this in other places before. Jesus realized his own limitations. Jesus realized that this woman had something to draw with, and he didn't. So he allowed her to see that he had limitations too. And oftentimes we don't want to be vulnerable enough to allow other people to see that we have some things that we cannot do. Friends, I'm here today because I know that I cannot be a part of this movement without you. I cannot speak about injustice without speaking to you. Because it cannot be just my problem. It has to be all of our problem. When we looked at the civil rights movement, if any of you all have watched the movie Selma or read about the civil rights movement, Things didn't change until Martin Luther King began to help the people to see that this was all of our problem. I can't do this without you. And I love that. God was revealing to us that we are interconnected. I'm only as good as you are. Jesus shows his own limitations. And then Jesus recognizes that others have something special to offer to the movement. I love this about this woman at the well. She was just so real. She was so real that she told Jesus in that moment, look, I don't even know why you're talking to me. I'm a Jew and you are a Samaritan. No, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan. And you know the Jews and Samaritans don't roll like that. We don't talk like that. Because the reason why is that Jews were considered to be full breed. Samaritans were half-breeds. Samaritans were known for idol worship. Jews did not want to associate with Samaritans because of their idol worship. And not only that, if there were any people in the culture that created a crime, they would actually send them away to Samaria. So Samaria was a place that was known for idol worship. They were known for being half-breeds, and they were known for being the place where the criminals were sent away to be. So they were a people that were ostracized. Nobody wanted to deal with the Samaritan people. In fact, in that culture, if somebody was traveling, they would not, if a Jew was traveling, they didn't go through Samaria, they went around Samaria. It's a 7 days journey to go around Samaria, a 3-day journey to go through. People would go out of their way to go around Samaria. And Jesus, in this moment, was being intentional. He said that I want to build a relationship so much so that I'm going to go to a place where other people normally would not go. Now understand this, for Jesus to be sitting at the well talking to the Samaritan woman, imagine being the disciples knowing that Jews and Samaritans don't associate with one another. Imagine them looking at this conversation going on and wondering to themselves, what in the world is Jesus doing over there? Talking to that Samaritan woman. We talked about the fact that Jews did not associate with Samaritans because of the idolatry. And we also talked about the fact that the criminals were there. And we talked about the fact that they were half-breeds. But we haven't talked about the fact that this was a woman. And in that culture, Jesus certainly wouldn't have been talking to a Samaritan woman. But Jesus in that moment was breaking down every barrier that we could think about. He was breaking down the barrier of racism. He was breaking down the barrier of classism. He was breaking down the barrier of sexism. Every barrier that you could think about, Jesus was breaking down in one intentional conversation with this woman at the well. And what I love about what Jesus did, which is the second thing I want to talk about, is that he eliminated the barrier of assumptions by understanding the past history of this woman. He knew why the woman was reluctant to talk to him. She was reluctant to talk to him because of the things that I just told you. She knew that he saw her as an idol worshiper. She knew that he saw her as an adulteress. She knew that he saw her also as a half-breed. She knew all of these things, and so she said, why are you talking to me? And Jesus, knowing that everything was informed by her past history, did not react. He responded. Now, I want to tell you all a little bit about me. I'm 44 years old, born in 1970. My grandmother, my great-grandmother rather, died in 1977. She was 102 years old. She was born in 1875. My great-great-grandmother, who was actually in the same household with my father at one point, she died in the 1950s. She was born a slave. My dad told me about this story. My dad grew up in the Jim Crow South. So he understood all of the prejudice that he had to deal with. So when I was growing up, he didn't teach me to be racist, but he taught me to be aware of people who were not like me. He actually warned me, beware of white people, because you cannot fully trust them. I went to a school where my mother taught, and she taught at a school called Lee Elementary School. Look it up, it's here in Austin. Robert E. Lee. She was one of the first African Americans to teach at that school. Now the name alone can tell you that Robert E. Lee, probably in the beginning, was not a school that you had a lot of African Americans going to. I lived in the middle of East Austin. I lived in a black culture all around me. That's all I saw. All day long was black. That's all I saw. But then when I went to elementary school, because my mother was teaching at this school, my mother said, I want you to come to school with me. So at the age of 5 years old, I go to kindergarten at this school that's all white. I mean, it was myself and like one other black guy that was in the school at first, and that guy and I are still friends to this very day. So here I am in this school, and I live in a community that's all African American, and I felt like a fish out of water at first. But in that, I believe that God was shaping me for where we are right now, because I have friends that are white and black now. Because over time, the school became increasingly a little bit more black, and I had to build friends with friendships with white people, because that's all that was there. So if you want to play, you're gonna have to play with white kids, and it was fun. But I say all that to say, my past history is what teaches me about what I'm about now. It shows me what I needed to do in life. And for everyone that we interact with, it's some past history that informs them. So when we look at the culture and what we're going through right now in this movement, it's all because of what we've dealt with in our past. You have a lot of people who were there who saw police use authority in the wrong way, with water hoses, with dogs, with billy clubs, directed at a group of people who only wanted to see equality. Our past history informs us. So when we see a young African American killed at the hands of a white officer, or any officer for that matter, then it reminds us of where we came from. And to be honest with you, it alarms us because we know that we cannot go back. But then at the same time, we understand that it takes all of us to be on the same boat together in order for us to make sure that we don't go back. And that's why I love your pastor, because he said, I want you to come here. And I can tell by the service that I can come and be real. And Jesus' interaction with this woman, he knows everything that she's gone through. I don't know everything that you've gone through, but I've shared a little bit about what I've gone through. In restorative justice, we got it straight from the Bible. We need to get people in a space where we can have intentional conversations, where we know where one another comes from, and we are the change that we want to see. And then if the change has not happened, then we can go to others who are empowered, and we can inform them about the change that we want to see in the system. I'll say this, the system is not broken. The system is doing what the system is designed to do. In this culture, when we look at the woman at the well, the system wasn't broken. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, and Jesus knew it. What Jesus was doing was breaking down the system. He said, although Jews don't associate with Samaritans, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it in a way that is so loving that people can't deny that God is using me to do it. I'm breaking down the system. And what we're doing right now is we're breaking down the system. We're coming in and we're saying that what we're going to do is be the change that we want to see. And we're going to actually tell the system that because we are a part of this system, that the system has to change. So, Jesus did this by breaking down the barrier of assumptions. So how do you break down that barrier? One, you have to know that assumptions are shaped by past experiences, and you have to listen to others before drawing conclusions. This is beautiful because I get a chance to speak and you all get a chance to listen. And so y'all don't get a chance to draw conclusions. because I got the microphone. But how do we put the microphone in other people's hands? That's the question. And how do we put the microphone in our hands so that other people can listen to us? That's the work that we do with restorative justice. We place the microphone in everybody else's hands, the people's hands, so those who have the perceived power can listen. Jesus knew that he was dealing with a culture of even religious believers that had perceived power. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Roman government, a system, people who had perceived power. And the only way for that perceived power, that system, to be broken down, to be changed, was to get more people on board with the movement that Jesus has. And that's the only thing we're calling you all to. We're calling you all to Jesus' movement. Not mine, not Martin Luther King's, because Martin Luther King was all about what Jesus was calling him to do, and he used a method that he learned from watching other people. He learned how to be humble and how to use nonviolence to transform a culture from watching a man and studying a man called Gandhi. We have to listen and not draw conclusions. The next thing, and the last thing, is that we have to motivate others. We have to motivate others to join us in our cause. I love this woman at the well, because Jesus, when he interacted with her, he allowed her to say everything that she needed to say. And then he just calmly says, if you knew who you were talking to, you would have asked me for living water. And she was like, living water? What are you talking about? Well, where is this water where I don't have to come back to this well again and draw from it? And in that moment, he was able to describe what this living water was all about. And I love the way that he challenged her, because he challenged her in a healthy way. He told her things about herself that he couldn't have known unless he was a prophet. He said, the man that you stand with is not your husband. You've been with 5 others. And she's like, oh my goodness, you know everything about me. You must be a prophet. And at the same time, he didn't judge her. So in our discussions with other people, we don't have to point out the pimples on their face. All we have to do is say that I can relate to where you are right now. I'm not judging you, but I know what you've been through. That's what Jesus was telling her. I know what you have been through. Now imagine this big circle. I want you to use your imagination. Usually this is where we have a PowerPoint, but imagine this big circle. And on the outside of it you have physical needs. So she's thinking about her physical needs. I need water. I don't have to come get it anymore. Where can I get the living water? On the inside of that circle you have social needs. The social needs is where I need to engage somebody in conversation. I need to have a connection to somebody. Jesus was making a connection with them. On the inside of that circle you have emotional needs. That's where life is messy, where you find out the drama that everybody has gone through. And right now he's talking about the drama, the mess that she's gone through, the man that she's with, and the low self-esteem that she must have had to have to go and jump from man to man to man, dealing with the messiness in life. And then in the middle of that is what we'll call the truth, the gospel, the truth. He was able to communicate the truth because he dealt with her on the physical, the social, and the emotional level first. So when we engage one another, I have to get to know you. I have to, in order for us to see that we can actually serve the same cause. So Jesus motivates her. And once she gets motivated, Jesus didn't have to go back to the Samaritan village and be the one that proclaimed himself. She went first. She went back and paved the way for Jesus to have this discussion. She goes into the village and she tells about this man that knows everything about her. Everything. And then what happens after that is Jesus comes along and she introduces Jesus. Jesus is on the scene and Jesus begins to talk. And once he begins to talk, they tell her, we no longer believe just because of what you say. Now we believe because we've encountered him for ourselves. Draw close to me for a second. What will people say? once they've had a conversation with you? What will people think about Jesus, about our God in heaven, because they had a chance to interact with you and I? That's what this movement is all about. This movement is not about building a kingdom here on earth. This movement is about knowing that there is a greater kingdom that is in front of us in heaven. But if I don't engage people where they are right now, then people won't be interested in that other kingdom, because they're living in this kingdom right now. They're living in this world. So I'm engaging people not because it's about me. I'm engaging people because it's about God. God has called us to this. It's not my idea. It's not Pastor John's idea. And it wasn't Martin Luther King's idea or any civil rights leader's idea. It was God's idea. So in this moment, Jesus motivates her. He empowers her. And I love this, and I'm almost done. He didn't make her go through a 6-week Bible course before she could go out and be kind and just share about this man that loved her and knew her and who accepted her. And sometimes we get so much in our head that we miss our hearts. God says, all I want you to do is lead out with your heart and let me shape your heart. And if you do that, people will connect to your heart. I've heard this said over and over again. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's true. So Jesus shared what he had to offer. He slowed down and he spent time with the people. Pay attention to our Bible. It speaks, and it speaks very slowly. In verse 40, it talks about the fact that the people of Samaria asked Jesus to stay. And what did he do? He stayed 2 more days. He slowed down. And if we're going to actually be able to carry out this movement, we have to be able to slow down, listen to what the people are saying, connect with the people where they are, and we have to be the change that we want to see. And then we have to see the opportunities that's right in front of us. I love what Jesus did in this text, because the disciples were looking at him. They were watching everything that he was doing, confused a little bit about what he was doing. And he looks out and he looks at all these people and he says, look, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Now, I've been doing this for a little minute now, and every time that we speak to a crowd of people, there's usually about 10% that show up to really do the work. The rest of the people are like, yes, yes, let's do it. Y'all go. Y'all should do it. That's just the way that it is. I wish it was different. But we have to speak to the crowd, because you don't know who is really going to do the work unless you speak to the crowd. And even if we're speaking to the crowd, at least we're planting seeds of love within the crowd. But Jesus reminds his followers that the harvest is plentiful. There's a lot of work to do. We have to recruit more workers. So that's what we're here today to do. We're here to say that we saw that Jesus was on the cross. Violence happened to him first. Jesus was beaten to within an inch of his life. Then when he was within an inch of his life, he was nailed to a cross. But the beautiful part about it is that once Jesus died, he got up. But he didn't just get up. He got up with all power in his hand. He faced everything that we could possibly face in life. So really what he tells us is that there's no excuse. I've been through that. Oh, prejudice, I've been through that. Racism, I've been through that. Classism, I've been through that. I was born in a manger. I wasn't born in the W Hotel. I've been through all of that. But I got up from it. And when I got up with all power, the power that I used was the power of love to draw people to myself. So if we're going to use our power, then we have to use our power in a way that's going to love people, love them to the point to where they say, I want that Jesus that you have. And even if I don't want that Jesus that you have yet, I do want this. I want that character that's oozing out of you. I want that compassion that's oozing out of you. I want to know what drives you. That's what we're calling people to do now. To be a part of this movement. To break down the barrier of assumptions. To add value to other people's lives. To be motivated to join us in what we're going to be doing. Pastor John is going to be giving some instructions in the days ahead about ways that we can get involved, and we're going to be here working to support one another and getting you all equipped. And I just truly believe that God aligned us for a reason. I'm so glad that He called me. And I see us doing great work together. I love you all. And God's peace be with you all. Amen.
Hey